I stood in the corner of the Ritz-Carlton ballroom, fighting the urge to adjust the tight collar of my server's uniform. The black polyester blend clung to my skin in all the wrong places, a far cry from the tailored cashmere suits that usually hung in my closet. But that was the point, wasn't it? I wasn't here as Claire Donovan, CEO of Donovan Hospitality Group. I was here as the help. My name wasn't on the guest list, and that wasn't some oversight. My own mother had been crystal clear when she called me last week. "You're not here to celebrate. You're here to serve." Her words had cut deeper than I'd expected, but I'd swallowed my pride and agreed anyway. Some masochistic part of me needed to witness this firsthand. I smiled politely as guests walked past me, complimenting the cascading orchid arrangements that I'd paid $15,000 for. A middle-aged woman in a navy dress stopped to admire the hand-blown crystal champagne flutes I'd specially imported from Venice. "Aren't these exquisite?" she gushed to her husband, completely unaware that the woman who would refill that glass was the one who had funded this entire wedding. "More champagne, ma'am?" I offered, extending my tray. She nodded without making eye contact. The Boston elite filled the room, doctors, lawyers, old money families my mother had always desperately wanted to be part of. The air was thick with Chanel No. 5 and entitlement. And my sister, Amanda, stood at the center of it all, glistening in a Vera Wang gown worth more than what she used to mock me for earning in my boring corporate job just 5 years ago. She hadn't spoken to me in 8 months, not since I'd betrayed the family by refusing to fund another one of her reckless ventures, a beachfront property in Nantucket she planned to flip without any experience. And yet, here I was, serving shrimp cocktails and holding trays of Veuve Clicquot like a well-trained ghost in my own hotel. I caught my reflection in one of the many gilded mirrors lining the wall. There was something surreal about seeing myself dressed like this, my usually perfectly styled brown hair pulled back in a severe bun, face bare of makeup. The uniform made me look like a stranger in a building I'd purchased 3 years ago. The truth was, I hadn't wanted to attend the wedding at all. But the moment my mother called and said, "It's her day, the only daughter of mine who will probably get married," something in me broke. The only daughter? As if I didn't exist. As if every sacrifice I'd made, putting myself through Wharton, building my company from nothing, supporting them financially for years, was just an unfortunate accident in their family narrative. I'd agreed to show up, not for them, but for me. For the truth. They thought this was just another fancy Boston hotel they couldn't afford, but somehow managed to book. They didn't know who owned the place. But they were about to find out. James, my head of security, caught my eye from across the room and raised an eyebrow. I gave him the slightest shake of my head. Not yet. I wanted to absorb every detail of this charade first. "You, girl." My mother's voice cut through my thoughts. She'd appeared beside me, resplendent in a royal blue Dior dress that I recognized from the collection I'd bought her last Christmas. "There's a spill at table 7. See to it immediately." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Up close, I could see the work she'd had done, the subtle lift around her eyes, the plumped lips. All paid for by the daughter she was treating like hired help. "And for God's sake, stand up straight. You look like you've never worked a day in your life," she added, before turning back to her friends, not waiting for my response. If she only knew. I'd worked every day of my adult life, clawing my way up from the reception desk at a rundown motel to owning a chain of luxury hotels across New England. Meanwhile, Amanda had floated through life on charm and my mother's belief that she was somehow the special one. As I wiped up the spilled wine at table 7, I overheard snippets of conversation about the venue. "So elegant," one woman said. "Amanda always did have impeccable taste." I bit back a laugh. Amanda wouldn't know impeccable taste if it came with a label. The vintage chandeliers that cast a warm glow over the room had been sourced by me from an estate sale in Provence. The hand-painted china plates that held delicate portions of sea bass had been commissioned by me from an artist in Cambridge. Every element of this wedding, from the gold-trimmed cutlery to the rare vintage of champagne being poured, had been chosen and paid for by me. Yet not one person in this room knew that the woman quietly serving their meals was the owner of not just this hotel, but 5 others across Massachusetts. They had dressed me in an apron, but they didn't know I had written the checks that made this wedding even possible. I moved mechanically through the room, filling glasses, clearing plates, watching, waiting. My sister laughed with her bridesmaids. Her husband, some finance guy from Beacon Hill, kept his hand possessively on her lower back. They looked picture perfect, like they belonged on top of the wedding cake they would soon cut. But I knew better. I knew about the credit card debt Amanda had hidden from him. I knew about the loans she'd taken out in our mother's name. I knew that this entire wedding was built on a foundation of lies and my money. Tonight was going to change everything. By the time the cake was cut, they would all know exactly who I was. The thought made me almost dizzy with anticipation. A guest snapped his fingers at me, gesturing for more wine. I plastered on my most servile smile and moved toward him, the weight of my secret making each step feel like I was walking through water. Just a few more hours. 2 hours into the reception, I developed a rhythm to my servitude. Smile, pour, clear, repeat. The role had become almost meditative, allowing me to observe everything while appearing invisible. The perfect disguise. Amanda floated through the room like Boston royalty, arms looped around her new husband, Blake. The Harvard Business School golden boy she'd met at a charity gala I'd sponsored but hadn't attended. Her diamond-encrusted wedding band caught the light with every animated gesture, sending prisms dancing across the walls. She looked genuinely happy, and for a moment, just a fleeting moment, I felt something warm in my chest. Maybe it was nostalgia for the sister who used to share my bedroom, the one who'd cry to me about playground bullies before she became one herself. Then I saw her glance toward me as I refilled a glass. She leaned into Blake, whispered something while pointing subtly in my direction, and they both laughed. I swallowed whatever was left of that warmth and tightened my grip on the champagne bottle. Did you see her face? I overheard Blake say as they moved past me. Priceless. Your mother was right, she'll really do anything for attention. My cheeks burned. So that's what they thought, that taking this job was just another desperate bid for attention. Not the calculated move of a woman who'd spent years being patient. Soft string music filled the air as couples began to dance. The band, a renowned quartet from Berklee College of Music, played an arrangement I'd suggested to the wedding planner 3 weeks ago. Another detail Amanda would take credit for. The music is divine, one elderly guest commented. So much more tasteful than those dreadful DJs everyone has nowadays. Amanda insisted, my mother replied, appearing beside the woman. She's always had an ear for classical music. I nearly snorted. The only classical music Amanda knew was the first 30 seconds of Beethoven's Fifth that played as her ringtone sophomore year of college. I watched as Blake's best man, Trevor, clinked his glass to begin the toasts. The crowd hushed obediently. I've known Blake since our days rowing crew at Phillips Exeter, Trevor began, his accent thick with old money and privilege. But I never saw him truly happy until he met Amanda Donovan. Donovan. My last name in his mouth felt wrong, like he was talking about someone else entirely. I'd built that name into something respected in business circles, and here it was, attached to my sister who'd never worked a day in her life. The toasts continued, Blake's parents thanking my mother for raising such a wonderful daughter, while my father, 3 years dead, went unmentioned. As if my mother had done it all alone. As if I hadn't been the one making the mortgage payments since I was 24. When my mother rose to give her speech, I positioned myself near the kitchen doors, half hidden by a floral arrangement. I needed to hear this. As a mother, she began, voice trembling with practiced emotion, there's nothing more beautiful than seeing your daughter find true happiness. She paused, dabbing at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. Amanda has always been special. From the moment she was born, I knew she was destined for something extraordinary. Special. The word echoed in my mind, taking me back to childhood dinners where Amanda's C+ in geometry was celebrated while my perfect report card went unacknowledged. To high school graduation where my mother threw Amanda a party for barely passing while my scholarship to Penn was treated as expected. To the Christmas where my first bonus check paid for Amanda's semester abroad in Paris because she was finding herself. And now, my mother continued, She's found her perfect match in Blake. A man worthy of the extraordinary woman she is. The crowd awed appreciatively. I felt sick. To Amanda and Blake, she raised her glass. May your lives together be as beautiful as you both are. Glasses clinked all around as I slipped into the kitchen, needing a moment to breathe. The chef, Marcos, glanced at me sympathetically. You okay, miss? He asked. He'd been briefed about who I really was, one of the few who knew. Fine, I managed. Just needed a second. Your filet mignon is getting rave reviews, he offered, clearly trying to cheer me up. That aged Bordeaux you paired with it? Genius. I nodded, grateful for the normal interaction. In here, at least, I was still Claire Donovan, respected businesswoman, not the nameless server my family had reduced me to. My moment of respite was short-lived. The kitchen doors swung open, and my mother walked in, eyes scanning the room until they landed on me. She barreled forward, her smile dropping the instant she was out of view of the guests. What are you doing hiding in here? She demanded, voice sharp and louder than necessary. There are dishes to serve, drinks to refill, tables to clean. This is your sister's day. She said it with such authority, like she was the queen of this event, of this building. I looked at her face, the face I'd inherited so much of my own from, and realized with startling clarity, she truly didn't see me anymore. To her, I was no longer family, just staff. I'm sorry, I said quietly. I just needed a minute. A minute? She scoffed. We don't have minutes to spare. Do you know how much this venue costs? Every second counts. If only she knew. The irony was almost too much to bear. Of course, I bowed my head slightly. I'll get back out there. And fix your hair, she added, already turning away. You look sloppy. I watched her leave, her designer heels clicking authoritatively on the marble floor. Marcos made a low whistle. That's your mother? He asked incredulously. Apparently, I replied, smoothing back my hair. And she has no idea. None, I confirmed. And let's keep it that way. For now. I moved back out into the reception, a renewed sense of purpose in my step. I navigated toward the head table, where Amanda was holding court with her bridesmaids, all sorority sisters from her brief stint at Boston College before she dropped out to pursue opportunities in fashion. Those opportunities had amounted to an unpaid internship she'd quit after 2 weeks and a failed blog about Newberry Street style. And then, Amanda was saying, champagne sloshing dangerously close to the edge of her flute, Claire shows up at my engagement party in a pantsuit. A pantsuit? Like she was going to a board meeting instead of celebrating her only sister. The girls tittered with laughter. At least she showed up, one of them offered, and for a second, I felt a wave of gratitude toward this stranger. Only to lecture me about budgets, Amanda rolled her eyes. As if I care about her spreadsheets and investment advice. Some of us want to actually live, not just work ourselves to death for some corporate validation. The gratitude evaporated. I moved around the table, refilling water glasses with mechanical precision, invisible despite being inches from them. I still can't believe she agreed to work the wedding, another bridesmaid whispered, not quite quietly enough. Isn't it kind of desperate? That's Claire for you, Amanda shrugged. Always trying to make everything about her. Even today. I froze, the water pitcher hovering mid-pour. Make everything about her? I had spent my entire life being erased by my family, pushed into the background while Amanda took center stage. Even now, dressed in a server's uniform instead of a bridesmaid's gown, I was being accused of seeking attention. The injustice of it burned through me, but I forced myself to continue pouring, to keep my face neutral. I had a plan, and everything was proceeding exactly as it should. Let them laugh. Let them dismiss me. They had no idea what was coming. The reception was in full swing now, the formalities of dinner giving way to the loose-limbed freedom of dancing and drinking. The band had transitioned from gentle classical pieces to upbeat covers that had even the older guests tapping their feet. Under different circumstances, I might have been proud of how perfectly the event was unfolding. Another successful evening at the Beacon, my flagship hotel. Instead, I was wiping Cabernet Sauvignon from a white linen tablecloth while trying to become even more invisible than I already was. The bridesmaids had migrated to the dance floor, leaving their table a wasteland of half-eaten cake and lipstick-stained napkins. I gathered the debris methodically, my mind elsewhere. "Would you look at that?" a male voice said nearby. I glanced up to see Blake's father talking to another silver-haired man in a bespoke suit. "Amanda's going to fit right in at the Cape House this summer." I followed their gaze to where my sister was now dancing with Blake's mother, both of them laughing as they attempted some kind of twirl. Amanda's hair had come slightly loose from her updo, giving her a carefree, windswept look that somehow made her even more beautiful. "Brightman told me they're already looking at property in Back Bay," the other man replied. "Smart investment. Though I imagine her family's helping with that too." Blake's father chuckled. "Apparently the mother's been putting money aside for years. Family money, you know how it is." I nearly laughed out loud. Family money? The only money my mother had was what I gave her. The monthly allowance I'd set up after our father died from a heart attack, buried in debt from trying to maintain the lifestyle my mother insisted was their right. As I moved away from their conversation, I found myself near a circle of Amanda's college friends. One of them, Melissa, I thought her name was gesturing with her martini glass. "It's the most amazing wedding I've ever been to," she gushed. "The detail, the venue, the food, it must have cost a fortune." "Blake's family helped," someone replied. "And her sister's loaded," another added. "Some corporate job. Though from what Amanda says, she's totally miserable. All work, no life." I froze mid-reach for an empty champagne flute. That's what Amanda told people about me. That I was miserable? The hotel chain I'd built from nothing was my pride, my passion, not some soul-sucking corporate job. "I heard the sister couldn't even make it today," Melissa continued, oblivious to my presence just feet away. Too busy climbing the ladder or whatever. Before I could process this bizarre rewriting of reality, I heard it. Amanda's voice, carrying over the music as she returned to her bridesmaids' circle. "I'm the only real success in the family," she announced, champagne sloshing as she gestured broadly. "At least I didn't waste my life playing pretend with fake businesses." Fake businesses? The words echoed inside me like thunder. The hotel chain that employed over 300 people across New England. The boutique investment fund I'd started 2 years ago that was already outperforming the market. The Spanish vineyard I'd purchased last summer, whose wine these people were currently drinking. Her friends laughed in agreement, nodding as if what she'd said made perfect sense. One of them, the redhead who'd been eyeing the best man all night, raised her glass. To the successful Donovan, she cheered. They clinked glasses, and I stood frozen, my hands trembling slightly as I clutched a half-filled garbage bag. I could feel my heart pounding in my ears, drowning out the music, the laughter, everything except the rage building inside me. I'd funded Amanda's attempts at careers for years. The fashion blog that lasted 3 months. The jewelry-making phase that produced exactly 17 pairs of lopsided earrings. The event-planning business that consisted of one disaster of a baby shower where she'd forgotten to order food. Through it all, I'd written the checks. Paid her rent when she couldn't. Covered the credit card bills she racked up trying to keep up with her wealthy friends. And now she was calling my businesses fake? I moved mechanically toward the kitchen, needing to escape before I said something I couldn't take back. But as I pushed through the door, I collided with my mother coming out. "Watch where you're going," she snapped, then recognized me. "Oh, it's you. Good. I've been looking everywhere." "Sorry," I murmured, stepping aside. Instead of passing by, she pulled me further into the kitchen, away from the servers bustling around with dessert plates. In her hand was a wine-stained napkin, which she thrust at me. "One of Blake's partners dropped this. Go clean it immediately. It's Armani." I stared at the napkin, then back at her. "Mom, I don't think," she cut me off. "Just do as you're told for once in your life. Unlike your sister, you've never understood your place in this family." My place. The words hit like a physical blow. "And when you're done," she continued, "make sure to keep a low profile for the rest of the night. This is a family event, not your chance to be seen." I stared at her, really stared. In her expensive dress and perfect makeup, with her immaculate hair and manicured hands, she looked like everything she'd always wanted to be: wealthy, respected, part of Boston's elite. But there was something else in her face too. Something I'd never fully recognized until this moment: disdain. She looked at me with such judgment, such condescension, it was as if she genuinely believed I was beneath her. The napkin in her hand might as well have been a mirror reflecting how little she thought of me. "Do I make myself clear?" she pressed when I didn't respond. I inhaled deeply and nodded. "Crystal clear." "Good." She thrust the napkin at me again, and this time I took it. "And for God's sake, try to look a little happier. People will think we don't pay you enough." With that, she swept back into the reception, leaving me standing there with a stranger's dinner debris in my hand. The kitchen staff moved around me, pretending not to have witnessed the exchange. Marcos caught my eye from the dessert station and raised an eyebrow in silent question. I shook my head slightly. "Senora Donovan," he said quietly, approaching me. "Are you okay?" "Yes," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. My hands were steady now, cold with clarity. "I'm going to need the office for a moment." He nodded, understanding immediately. Everyone on staff knew about the small executive office tucked behind the main kitchen, my private space in the hotel. Somewhere I could retreat to when I visited unannounced, which I often did. The staff were used to me appearing in jeans and a sweater, walking through the kitchen to steal tastes of Marcos's latest creations, asking about their families, their lives. None of them had ever seen me like this, in a uniform, holding garbage, being berated by my own mother. I walked to the office, closed the door behind me, and took a deep breath. On the wall hung a framed newspaper article from 3 years ago. Donovan Hospitality Group acquires historic Beacon Hotel. My first major acquisition. The photo showed me cutting a ribbon, smiling, proud. I'd never shared that article with my family. Never told them I'd bought the hotel where my high school prom had been held, where my parents had celebrated their 25th anniversary, where Amanda had always dreamed of having her wedding reception. I'd kept it to myself, letting them believe it was just another luxury venue they couldn't afford, but somehow managed to book at a special rate. I folded the napkin carefully and placed it on my desk. Then I pulled out my phone and made the call I'd been waiting to make all evening. "James," I said when my head of security answered. "It's time." "Are you sure?" he asked. We'd discussed this possibility, but he knew what it would mean. "Yes," I replied, feeling lighter than I had in years. "Kindly escort every uninvited guest off my property, starting with the bride and my mother." "Right away, Ms. Donovan," he replied, professional as always. I hung up and looked at my reflection in the small mirror on the wall. I straightened my uniform, smoothed back my hair, and drew myself up to my full height. The server was gone. Claire Donovan, CEO, was back. And she was about to reclaim her narrative. I re-entered the ballroom with a strange sense of calm. The music was still playing, the band had moved on to Sinatra now, "The Way You Look Tonight," filling the air as couples swayed on the dance floor. Amanda and Blake were at its center, her head on his shoulder, his hand at the small of her back. For a fleeting second, I felt a twinge of something, not quite regret, but acknowledgement that what I was about to do couldn't be undone. Then I caught my mother's eye from across the room. She gave me a sharp look and an impatient gesture toward a table where champagne glasses sat empty. The twinge evaporated. I spotted James by the main entrance, now flanked by 2 other security team members in their crisp black suits. He met my gaze and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. I returned it, then made my way to the sound booth where the lighting and audio controls were located. "Ms. Donovan," the technician said, surprised to see me in my server's uniform. "Cut the music in 30 seconds, I instructed. Then bring up all the house lights." He hesitated. "But the schedule says new schedule," I said firmly. 30 seconds. He nodded, adjusting his headset. I stepped back and counted down in my head. 29, 28, 27. The song came to an abrupt halt mid-phrase. Confused murmurs swept across the room like ripples in still water. Then the lights flickered and brightened, harsh and revealing after hours of flattering dimness. Guests began looking around, unsure of what was happening, conversations dying as all eyes turned toward the silent band. Just as planned, two sharply dressed security officers entered and began moving purposefully toward the head table. I followed behind them, no longer hiding, no longer afraid. With each step, I shed more of the invisibility that had wrapped around me all evening. "What's going on?" Blake demanded as the security team approached. "Who stopped the music?" My mother rose from her seat, champagne glass still in hand. "What is the meaning of this?" she barked, looking at the guards with fury. Beside her, Amanda was frozen, her mouth slightly open, eyes darting between the security officers and the confused faces of her guests. I stepped forward, calm and poised. "I apologize for the interruption," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. My voice carried across the now silent room. "I'm Claire Donovan, owner of the Beacon Hotel, and as of this moment, the event is over." The silence that followed was immediate, thick, and electric. I watched as recognition dawned on various faces. Some guests clearly knew who I was from business circles, while others just looked confused. My sister's jaw dropped. My mother looked as if she'd seen a ghost. "Claire," she hissed, "have you lost your mind? Get back to work before you what, Mom?" I cut her off. "Fire me? I don't work for you. I never did." I gestured around the room. "I own this place." Amanda stood slowly, confusion giving way to rage. "You're lying," she spat. "You're just a servant." I finished for her. "A nobody? The invisible sister? Is that what you were going to say?" I took a step closer. "The truth is, Amanda, this place, this wedding, this fantasy, you've been living in something I created, and I'm done letting you pretend otherwise." Blake looked between my sister and me, then at his parents, clearly trying to piece together what was happening. "I don't understand," he said finally. "You work here? You own this hotel? What is this? Your wife never told you about her sister?" I asked, my voice softer now, almost pitying. "The one who's been funding her lifestyle for years? The one who apparently runs fake businesses?" I raised my eyebrows at Amanda, whose face had gone from red to white. "I never said that," she insisted weakly. "I heard you. Not 30 minutes ago," I replied. "You and your friends seem to think I'm some corporate drone who couldn't make it to your wedding because I'm too busy climbing the ladder." I made air quotes with my fingers. The truth is, I wasn't invited. Instead, I was asked to serve. At my own hotel. At a wedding I paid for. Murmurs rippled through the crowd again. I could see Blake's parents exchanging horrified glances. This wasn't just a family squabble anymore. It was a social catastrophe unfolding in front of Boston's elite. "Claire," my mother stepped forward, her voice suddenly honey-sweet. "Darling, you're tired. Let's talk about this privately." "No," I said simply. "No more private conversations where you tell me my place. No more pretending I don't exist until you need money." I turned to the stunned guests. "I apologize for the inconvenience, but this event is now over. You may collect your things and exit through the main doors." No one moved. They all seemed frozen, caught between the spectacle unfolding and the social awkwardness of being the first to leave. "This is ridiculous," Amanda snapped, finding her voice again. "Blake, tell them we've paid for this venue until midnight." Blake turned to his new wife, a strange expression crossing his face. "Did you?" he asked quietly. "Or did your sister?" The flash of panic in Amanda's eyes was answer enough. "Ms. Donovan," James approached me. "Shall we begin the evacuation?" "Please," I nodded. The security team began moving through the crowd, politely but firmly directing guests toward the exit. Some left immediately, grabbing purses and jackets, clearly eager to escape the drama. Others lingered, watching with barely concealed fascination as my family's private humiliation played out in public. Blake's father approached me, his expression carefully controlled. "Ms. Donovan," he said, extending his hand. "Charles Winthrop. I believe we've met at the Harvard Business School fundraiser last year." I shook his hand, surprised. "Yes, I believe we did." "Had I known the connection, I would have," he began, but I cut him off gently. "There was no way you could have known. It seems information about me was deliberately withheld." I glanced at Amanda, who was now in a heated whisper fight with Blake. Charles nodded, understanding more than I'd said. We'll be in touch. Blake may have some adjustments to make in light of this new information. As he walked away to collect his wife, I felt a momentary pang for Blake. He'd married into a mess he hadn't fully comprehended yet. My mother grabbed my arm as I moved to walk away. "How dare you," she hissed, her nails digging into my skin. "How dare you humiliate us like this? After everything we've done for you." I looked at her hand, then up at her face. "Everything you've done for me?" I repeated, incredulous. "You've done nothing but take. For years, I've supported you, paid your bills, funded Amanda's failures. And tonight, you dressed me as a servant in my own building." "It was a joke," she insisted, her grip loosening. "We thought you'd find it funny." "No, you didn't," I said softly. "You thought I'd take it like I've taken everything else. But I'm done." I gently removed her hand from my arm. "Security will escort you out. Your things will be sent to your apartment tomorrow." "My things? What are you talking about?" "The apartment I bought for you," I clarified. "The one you've been living in rent-free for 3 years. I'm selling it. You have 30 days to find a new place." The color drained from her face. "You can't do that." "Actually, I can. It's my property." I turned to James. "Please make sure Ms. Donovan and the bride leave the premises." As I walked away, I heard Amanda's voice rise in panic. "Claire, you can't do this. Where are we supposed to go for the after-party?" "The Winthrops are expecting." I didn't turn around. I kept walking, past gawking guests, past the band who were hurriedly packing up their instruments, past the wedding planner who was frantically tapping on her tablet. I walked until I reached the small balcony off the mezzanine level where the cool Boston night air hit my face like freedom. Below me, I could see guests spilling out onto the cobblestone driveway, climbing into waiting town cars, already on their phones, no doubt spreading the news of what would become the scandal of the season. Photographers who had been documenting the society wedding of the year were now capturing a very different story: Amanda's teary, makeup-smeared face and my mother's trembling hands as they were escorted to the curb. It was done. After years of being invisible, I had finally become the most visible person in the room. The ballroom emptied quickly. A wedding reception designed to last until midnight concluded before 10 o'clock, leaving behind half-eaten slices of cake, abandoned champagne flutes, and centerpieces still in full bloom. The staff moved efficiently, clearing tables and shutting down bars. They'd seen events end abruptly before, though never quite like this. I'd changed out of the server's uniform into clothes I kept in my office, dark jeans and a cashmere sweater that felt like armor after hours in polyester. I sat alone at one of the tables I had wiped clean just hours before, nursing a glass of Macallan Neat. The quiet was profound after the chaos. Marcos appeared at my side, setting down a plate of something that smelled divine. "You didn't eat all night," he said simply. I looked up, grateful for the normal interaction. "Thank you. Staff is calling it the Red Wedding," he added with a hint of a smile. "Though less bloody, thankfully." A laugh escaped me, surprising us both. "Game of Thrones references already? That was fast." He shrugged. "Social media moves quickly. It's trending on Boston Twitter." My stomach dropped. "Already? Rich sister crashes socialite wedding is the most popular headline so far." He pulled out his phone to show me. Though my personal favorite is Cinderella in reverse, CEO goes undercover at sister's wedding, chaos ensues. I groaned, pushing the phone away. The consequences of my actions were unfolding faster than I'd anticipated. "How bad is it?" "Depends on your goal," Marcos replied candidly. "If you wanted people to know what happened, mission accomplished. If you wanted privacy." He trailed off with a grimace. I took a long sip of whiskey, letting it burn down my throat. The chandeliers sparkled above me, now lighting an empty hall. There was no applause, no music, just the soft hum of air conditioning and the fading buzz of adrenaline. My phone vibrated again, the 14th call from Amanda in the past hour. I silenced it without looking. Whatever she had to say could wait until tomorrow, or next week, or never. "You should eat," Marcos urged before walking away, leaving me with my thoughts and his perfectly cooked steak. I cut into the meat mechanically, though I had no appetite. The food was excellent, of course. Marcos never served anything less, but I barely tasted it. The double doors at the far end of the room opened, and James entered, his expression unreadable as always. "All clear, Ms. Donovan," he reported. "Though I should inform you that your sister and mother are still in the lobby, refusing to leave." I sighed, putting down my fork. "What do they want?" "Your sister seems quite concerned about her wedding gifts. She's demanding access to the suite where they're being held." Of course she was. The gifts, probably worth tens of thousands in total, were more important than the relationship she'd just destroyed. Or rather, the relationship I'd finally acknowledged was already destroyed. "Tell her she can collect them tomorrow. With supervision." I paused, and after signing a receipt for each item, James's mouth twitched in what might have been a smile. "Very good, ma'am." As he turned to leave, I added, "And James? Thank you for everything tonight." He nodded. "Just doing my job, Miss Donovan." But we both knew it was more than that. James had been with me since the beginning, the first security hire when I'd acquired my second hotel. He'd seen the calls from my family at all hours, the demands for money, the way I'd bend over backward to please them. He'd been the one to suggest tonight's plan in the first place, after overhearing a particularly vicious call from my mother. Sometimes he'd said quietly after I'd hung up, "People need to see who you really are." The doors closed behind him, and I was alone again with the remnants of Amanda's perfect day. I pulled out my phone and opened Twitter, bracing myself for the flood of opinions, the memes, the hot takes from people who knew nothing about my family beyond what they'd just witnessed. Sure enough, #DonovansistBatten was trending locally. Videos taken by guests showed the moment the music stopped, my confrontation with Amanda, security escorting them out. One particularly viral clip showed my mother shouting, "Do you know who I am?" at a security guard who clearly didn't care. I scrolled through comments, a strange detachment settling over me. Some people were calling me a hero, boss energy, and queen behavior, peppered the responses. Others thought I was the villain, imagine ruining your sister's wedding out of jealousy, and some people just can't stand not being the center of attention. None of them really understood. This wasn't about one night or one wedding. It was about years of erasure, of being treated as an ATM with a pulse, of watching my mother and sister rewrite reality to cast themselves as the main characters and me as barely a footnote. My phone rang again, not Amanda this time, but Blake. That was unexpected. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Claire Donovan." "Claire." His voice was tight. "We need to talk." "I think we've said enough for one night, don't you?" He exhaled sharply. "Look, I didn't know about any of it. The money, the hotel, how they treated you. I swear." Something in his tone made me believe him. "So now what?" I asked. "Now I need to figure out what else my new wife has been hiding," he said flatly. "Starting with those credit cards Amanda apparently has in your mother's name." I closed my eyes. Of course he'd heard that part. "That's between you and Amanda. Is it true?" I didn't answer immediately, weighing loyalty against truth. But hadn't I just blown up any pretense of family loyalty? "Yes," I said finally. "It's true. She has about $70,000 in debt spread across 4 cards." His sharp intake of breath told me this was news. Jesus Christ. "Welcome to the family, Blake." "I'm beginning to think I made a huge mistake," he said quietly. I felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but understanding. "That's not my problem to solve," I said, more gently than I'd intended. "No, I suppose it's not." He paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry about tonight. What they did to you is wrong." I hadn't expected that. "Thank you," I managed. "I should go." "Amanda's." He trailed off. "Having a meltdown?" I supplied. "Something like that." He sighed. "Goodbye, Claire." "Goodbye, Blake." I hung up, oddly touched by the brief conversation. At least someone in this mess had a conscience. I finished my whiskey and stood, surveying the ballroom one last time. The staff had worked quickly, almost all evidence of the wedding had been cleared away. Tomorrow, this space would host a corporate luncheon, and within a week, No one would remember that the Donovan Winthrop wedding had imploded here. But Boston society would remember. The gossip would spread through Beacon Hill townhouses and Back Bay apartments, whispered over brunch at the Bristol and cocktails at the Oak Bar. My family's humiliation would be complete. And yet, I felt no triumph. No vindication. Just emptiness and a bone-deep exhaustion. I walked out of the ballroom, nodding to the few staff members still working. In the grand lobby, I spotted my mother and Amanda sitting stiffly on a velvet sofa, surrounded by shopping bags and small luggage. Amanda's perfect updo had collapsed, and her mascara had tracked down her cheeks. My mother sat ramrod straight, her dignity apparently all she had left to cling to. They saw me at the same moment. Amanda jumped to her feet, but my mother placed a restraining hand on her arm. "Claire," my mother called, her voice carrying across the marble floor. "This is ridiculous. Let's talk like adults." I kept walking, heading for the private elevator that would take me to my penthouse suite at the top of the hotel. "Claire." Amanda's voice was shrill now. "You can't just leave us here. Where are we supposed to go?" I turned, just before stepping into the elevator. "I hear the Marriott has vacancies," I said coolly, and let the doors close on their shocked faces. In the silence of the elevator, I leaned against the wall and closed my eyes. For the first time in years, I felt something like peace settling over me. Not because I had embarrassed them, though that had been satisfying in the moment, but because I had finally stepped out from behind the curtain they had kept me hidden behind. They had made me a servant at my sister's wedding, not knowing I owned the place. And now they would never forget it. The elevator doors opened directly into my suite, where floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor. The lights of the city sparkled against the dark water, steady and constant. I kicked off my shoes and walked to the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Tomorrow would bring consequences I couldn't yet imagine. Angry calls, possible legal threats, more social media storms. But tonight, in this quiet moment above the city, I was finally free of the weight I'd carried for so long, the desperate need to be seen, to be valued, by people who were incapable of doing either. I had loved them once. I might always love them in the complicated way you love family even when they hurt you. But I had chosen myself this time, and that made all the difference. A week after what the Boston Globe Society page had dubbed the Beacon Incident, I was sitting in my corner office overlooking the public garden, skimming through emails with one eye on the muted television. The story had indeed gone viral, spinning outward from local gossip to national news. A segment on rich people drama had featured blurry phone footage of my confrontation with Amanda, and my PR team had fielded calls from 3 morning shows requesting interviews. I had declined them all. Let the internet have its fun. I had a business to run. My assistant, Tessa, knocked lightly before entering with a steaming cup of coffee. "Your 10 o'clock canceled," she announced. "And these just arrived." She placed a small stack of envelopes on my desk. "More hate mail?" I asked, only half joking. The first few days after the wedding, I'd received a surprising number of handwritten notes from Amanda's friends, telling me in no uncertain terms what they thought of my behavior. "Actually, they look like thank you cards," Tessa replied. "And the reservation system crashed again this morning." I raised an eyebrow. "Too much traffic?" She nodded. "People are trying to book the wedding showdown suite, which, by the way, doesn't exist. Marketing wants to know if we should lean into it or shut it down." I laughed to spite myself. "Let me think about it." I picked up one of the envelopes, noting the heavyweight stationery and elegant script. "Definitely not hate mail." Tessa lingered in the doorway. "Also, your mother called." Again. My mood darkened instantly. "What did you tell her?" "The same thing I've been telling her all week, you're in meetings." She gave me a sympathetic look. "She said to remind you that she has nowhere to go at the end of the month." Her exact words were, "Tell Claire not to be childish." The familiar surge of guilt and anger rose in my chest. Even now, my mother was trying to manipulate me, to make me the villain in her story. "Thank you, Tessa. That's all for now." After she left, I opened the first envelope. Inside was a cream-colored card with a handwritten note. "Dear Ms. Donovan, you don't know me, but I was a guest at your sister's wedding. I've worked as a server for 15 years, and I've seen how people like your family treat staff. What you did took courage. Thank you for showing us all that respect isn't determined by which side of the serving tray you're on. Sincerely, Margaret Chin. I read it twice, touched by the unexpected support. The next card was from a local business owner who'd heard the story and wanted to offer me a complimentary dinner at her restaurant. The third was from a woman who'd been disinherited by her family and wanted me to know I wasn't alone. The outpouring was unexpected. For every society matron who thought I'd committed an unforgivable breach of etiquette, there seemed to be 3 people who saw something different in my actions, a stand against entitlement, against erasure, against the quiet indignities so many people suffered in silence. My phone buzzed with a text from James. You should see this. Attached was a link to a Boston Business Journal article. I clicked it open, not sure what to expect. Donovan Hospitality Group sees record bookings following viral wedding incident, the headline proclaimed. The article detailed how all 6 of my hotels had seen a surge in reservations, with the Beacon specifically booked solid for the next 3 months. I sat back in my chair, stunned. This wasn't the fallout I had anticipated. I had expected damage control, not whatever this was. My desk phone lit up. Marcos calling from the Beacon. Tell me you've seen the numbers, he said when I answered. Just now. Is it really as good as it looks? Better, he confirmed. And there's something else. People are asking for you when they come in. Not just business types, regular guests. They want to meet the boss lady who stood up for herself. One couple even brought flowers yesterday. This was surreal. What are you telling them? That you're busy running an empire, he chuckled. But maybe you should make an appearance. Own the narrative, as they say. He wasn't wrong. For years, I'd operated behind the scenes, letting my hotels speak for themselves. Maybe it was time for a more visible approach. I'll think about it, I promised before hanging up. I swiveled my chair to look out at the garden, where early spring was painting the trees with hints of green. Boston was waking up from winter, and somehow, so was I. My intercom buzzed. Ms. Donovan, Tessa's voice held a note of caution. Your sister is here. My stomach tightened. Here? In the office? In the lobby? Security called up. She's insisting on seeing you. I took a deep breath. This confrontation was inevitable, but I hadn't expected it so soon. Tell them I'll be down in 5 minutes. I took a moment to collect myself, smoothing my hair and straightening my blazer. Whatever Amanda wanted, to yell, to cry, to demand more money, I would face it with the same composure I'd found that night at the wedding. The elevator ride to the lobby felt longer than usual. When the doors opened, I spotted Amanda immediately, pacing near the reception desk, still recognizably glamorous despite her obvious distress. She wore oversized sunglasses and a trench coat that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. She saw me at the same moment and froze mid-step. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other across the marble expanse. Is there somewhere we can talk? She asked when I approached, her voice tight with control. I nodded toward a small conference room off the main lobby. In there. We entered in silence. Amanda removed her sunglasses, revealing red-rimmed eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept well in days. Good, a petty part of me thought. Welcome to my world. Blake left, she said without preamble, dropping into a chair. He's filing for an annulment. I sat across from her, keeping my expression neutral. I'm sorry to hear that. She laughed bitterly. Are you? Isn't this exactly what you wanted? To ruin my life. I didn't ruin your life, Amanda. I just stopped letting you and Mom ruin mine. She looked away, blinking rapidly. He found the credit cards. And the loan papers. He called me a fraud. Her voice cracked on the last word. I felt a complicated wave of emotions, satisfaction that the truth had finally emerged, and an unexpected pang of sympathy for the sister I'd once protected from everything. What do you want me to say? I asked quietly. That I'm surprised? That it's unfair? You've been living beyond your means on my money for years, lying to everyone, including your husband. What did you think would happen? I don't know, she burst out. I never thought about it. I just wanted. She trailed off, seemingly unable to articulate what exactly she'd wanted. A perfect life without working for it, I finished for her. The appearance of success without actually achieving anything. Her face crumpled, and for a moment I thought she might cry. But Amanda had always been better at anger than vulnerability. "You think you're so much better than me," she spat. "Saint Clair, who built everything herself. You have no idea what it's like living in your shadow." I stared at her, genuinely shocked. "My shadow? Are you serious?" "Mom has been telling me you're the only daughter who matters since we were kids. You've been the center of every family event, every holiday, every conversation. Because that's all I had." She leaned forward, eyes blazing. "You got the brains, the drive, the business sense. What was left for me? Being pretty? Being liked? Do you know what it's like knowing your sister makes more money before breakfast than you'll make in your entire life?" I'd never considered this perspective, that Amanda might be jealous of me, rather than the other way around. It was so contrary to everything I'd experienced that I struggled to process it. "So you punished me for it," I said slowly. "Made me invisible. Treated me like I was beneath you." She had the grace to look ashamed, at least momentarily. "I didn't think of it that way." "Of course you didn't. You never had to think about how I felt." We sat in silence for a moment, years of miscommunication and resentment hanging between us like a physical presence. "I need money," she said finally, "to get my own place. Blake froze our joint accounts." And there it was. The real reason for her visit. Not reconciliation, not understanding, just another withdrawal from the Bank of Clare. "No," I said simply. She blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct refusal. "What?" "No more money, Amanda. Not a cent. You're 32 years old. It's time to support yourself." "How am I supposed to do that?" she demanded. "I don't have a job. I don't have any skills." That's not my problem anymore," I cut her off. "Figure it out, like everyone else in the world does." She stared at me, her expression shifting from disbelief to fury to something that looked almost like respect. "You've changed," she said quietly. "Not really. I've always been this person. You just never bothered to see me." I stood up, signaling the end of our conversation. "I have a meeting. Security will show you out." She gathered her purse and sunglasses, moving with the practiced dignity that had been drilled into us since childhood. At the door, she paused. "Mom has nowhere to go, you know. When you sell the apartment." "She has options," I replied. "She just doesn't like them." Amanda nodded once, a gesture that wasn't quite acceptance, but wasn't quite defiance either. Then she slipped her sunglasses back on and walked out without another word. I took a moment to compose myself before returning to my office. The encounter had been less explosive than I'd feared, but more emotionally draining than I'd anticipated. For the first time, I'd glimpsed Amanda as a whole person, not just the favored daughter who'd made my life miserable. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it added a layer of complexity to our shared history. Back in my office, I found Tessa waiting with a fresh cup of coffee and a thoughtful expression. "How did it go?" she asked. "About as well as could be expected," I replied, accepting the coffee gratefully. "What's next on the agenda?" She consulted her tablet. "The Four Seasons called. They want to discuss a possible acquisition." I nearly choked on my coffee. The Four Seasons had been on my wish list for years, a property I'd admired but assumed was out of reach. "They called us." Tessa nodded, smiling. "Apparently your reputation enhancement has caught some attention in the right circles. The VP mentioned something about admiring your decisive leadership style." I laughed. "Is that what they're calling it now?" "That and a few other choice phrases." She handed me a folder with the preliminary details. "They want to meet next week." As Tessa left, I turned back to the window, watching the people in the garden below, business people hurrying to meetings, tourists taking photos, nannies pushing strollers. Normal lives unfolding in a city that suddenly seemed full of new possibilities. The past week had rewritten my narrative, not as a daughter seeking approval, but as a woman standing in her truth. I'd spent so long believing I was invisible to the people who mattered most, not realizing that I had been visible all along to everyone else, my staff, my colleagues, strangers who resonated with my story. I didn't speak to Amanda again after that day. Not because I hated her. I'd realized I no longer had the energy for hatred, but because I had outgrown the version of myself that needed her validation. I had loved her once. I might always love her in the complicated way you love family even when they hurt you. But I had chosen myself this time, and that made all the difference. A month later, I walked through the Beacon, now branded in marketing materials as Boston's most talked about luxury experience. The grand ballroom was being set up for a charity gala, my charity gala, benefiting a scholarship fund for first-generation college students. A young woman was arranging centerpieces, her movements careful and precise. She looked nervous, glancing around as if worried someone would tell her she was doing it wrong. "You're doing great," I said as I passed. "One day, you might own a place like this." She blinked, surprised by both the compliment and who it came from. "Thank you, Miss Donovan." I smiled and continued on my way, no longer in a server's uniform, but in a tailored suit that felt like armor in the best possible way. No longer invisible, but seen. Exactly as I deserved to be.